Good evening. This is Dale Wetzel. We're coming to you from the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck, North Dakota, and it looks as if the traffic in the bar and restaurant is quite healthy. If you're in downtown Bismarck and want a nice drink and a good meal and a group of folks that knows how to cook a good steak, this is the place to come. It's in downtown Bismarck, and if you're out cruising around our fair capital city, please come on down. It's a wonderful atmosphere in which to sit and talk to your friends or your significant other and enjoy a good drink and a nice meal. This hour of the Legislature today is sponsored by the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties. We have with us as our guest this evening, we have Mr. Dan Brose, who's the city engineer of the city of Bowman, and he is the president and chairman of the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties. We have Mr. Brady Pelton, the deputy director of the association, and we have Mr. Ron Ness, who is the president of the North Dakota Petroleum Council. I said North Dakota. You're producing the fizzy stuff out in western North Dakota, are you not? Let's forget that I said that. And we're going to be speaking to these gentlemen about issues of interest in western North Dakota's oil-producing counties. First of all, we're going to give you a little recap of what happened in the legislature today. One of the big events was a rally that was held in the Memorial Hall of the Capitol. It drew more than 300 folks. It was a protest against recent bills that the legislature has approved that would restrict abortion. One of the bills restricts abortion, it essentially bans abortion except in very limited circumstances after 6 weeks. Another one bans abortion after 20 weeks of pregnancy. Another one is a constitutional amendment which is actually going to be on the ballot no matter what the governor does, because the House and Senate have approved this amendment, and it goes on the ballot in November of 2014. It will be Measure 1 on the November 2014 ballot, and it says that the state of North Dakota must protect life from during all stages of development. And there are a number of questions about what the practical effect of this amendment will be. And there were some more than 300 folks in the Capitol Memorial Hall today to express their disapproval of this approach that the legislature has taken. And we'll see how this affects next year's election results and how it affects the turnout and the level of fervor for the election, because next year there is no Senate race in North Dakota. There is no race for governor. The top of the ticket is the North Dakota race for Congress, and there's a few other state offices, but it appears that one of the major oxygen users of next year's election is going to be the abortion issue, and we'll see how well that what the effects are for the two political parties. In the meantime, we're going to turn from that to oil issues. Again, we have Mr. Dan Brose, the city engineer in Bowman, North Dakota, and the president of the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties. We have Mr. Ron Ness, the president of the North Dakota Petroleum Council, and Mr. Brady Pelton, the deputy director of the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties, which is our sponsor for this hour of the legislature today. First of all, one of the things that the legislature did today was approved a bill dealing with extraordinary road use fees. And Mr. Pelton, I wanted to get your explanation of what these are and why this is a significant bill.
Sure thing, Dale. Well, first of all, Senate Bill 2025 was heard before the House floor today, and it did receive a do-pass recommendation from the House Transportation Committee. Although that recommendation was pretty narrow, it came out with a 7-6 do-pass.
Did this bill pass?
It sure did, yeah, and we were pretty happy to see that. This is one of those bills that essentially what it does, it provides that the fees that are assessed for overweight vehicle loads on local roads, it allows those to be retained by the entity in which has the jurisdiction over that road. So a city or a county would have the authority to keep the fees that are assessed for driving overweight on those roads.
So are the cities and counties going to be fighting over who gets to pull over the overweight trucks?
I don't believe so, but we're encouraged that enforcement of those overweight fees is going to go up a bit. The bill was...
I'm sure it will if they get to keep the money.
I would hope so. Now, this is the second time that this has really been looked at by the legislature. Last session, it was defeated, and we're happy to see it go this time around.
Mr. Brose, as an engineer, I'm sure you see every day the effects of overloaded trucks on county roads. What do you think about this approach?
I think it's probably something that's needed. I don't know if it'll have as much effect as everybody thinks it will, but the one thing everybody has to remember, I know we've had other people have talked about it, and there's been studies done. The toughest thing on a road is trucks, and we've obviously out west we've talked a lot about it because that you can drive cars on a road all day long and it doesn't do much. Trucks have an effect on them. The biggest problem, though, is when it really goes up exponentially if an overloaded vehicle goes across that road. That really cuts down the life of the road and way faster than even illegal loads for trucks. So it's something that we need. It's one of those things where it'll be I see as an issue that needs to be, I shouldn't say needs to be, but should be addressed. How much it will, because there's a couple other things that reality sets in. The local guy doesn't, the local sheriff still got to get elected. And so how many does he pick up and how many doesn't he? But the pressure is that you're supposed to because the fact that, the one problem is you have 90% of the guys that run legal and the 10% that don't are the ones that ruin the roads. So it's a really catch-22. You don't want to be a bad guy to your neighbor, but on the other hand, the neighbor shouldn't be wrecking the roads either. So
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying about the sheriff needing to get reelected, but I imagine that the temptation of being able to keep the fines is quite high.
Well, I suppose it is if it's high enough, if they're really overloaded.
I guess that leads to another question. Is this going to result in higher fines, perhaps, in the future for overloaded vehicles, and should it?
I don't know. It may or may not. It depends on. This is one of those things where that has been the concern, is if you do this, everybody's going to be picking everybody up, and so we're going to have overzealous people out there doing that, and so I'm going to guess that'll get watched pretty carefully the next 2 to 4 years, and before you get to raise fines. It didn't go through a few years ago trying to raise and we've been trying to raise even a speeding ticket or whatever, and our local or our North Dakota people have a big appetite for that. So yeah, I don't know if it's going to. I don't know if it's going to be as big of impact as everybody thinks it is. Everybody just thinks that why should the sheriff go out and do some work on roads when they don't get to, or the city or somebody go out and you don't get to keep it anyway. So it goes to the state, and it's just a perception thing, I think, as much as anything.
Yeah, our big argument on that is that the penalty should really go where the damage is being done. Mm-hmm. So,
Mr. Ness, does the Petroleum Council have any particular opinion on what should be done with extraordinary road use fees?
Well, I think we were supportive of this bill, and primarily it's the issue of getting more money back to these rural communities, these cities, these communities, these counties, for the impacts that are being created. And this bill doesn't just apply to oil and gas related counties, it's all counties. So any time where there's penalties like this assessed by the locals, that's what all of these bills do. I think 1358, this bill, is get more of those dollars back to the communities at a time when the state of North Dakota is pretty well flush with revenues and the communities are short.
I wanted to ask you, Mr. Ness, about the progress of redistributing some of the oil tax revenue that the state collects to local governments. What is your assessment of how well the legislature is doing in trying to accomplish this goal?
Well, this has been our number one goal. This is the third legislative session that our number one priority coming into the session was to get more of those tax revenues back to those communities, because not only do they desperately need them, but in addition, industry is paying additionally for these resources in hiring contractors themselves to repair roads, additional contributions back to those communities in terms of services and badly needed services. So this is a big issue, and I think in fairness to the legislature, people struggled to grasp that, the Bakken was right during the 2007 legislative session. Nobody really knew what the Bakken was. 2009, the price of oil went from $147 to $30 a barrel, so legislators were nervous. 2011, we made incredible strides, $1 billion to western North Dakota. And yet, a year and a half later, or a year later, we all realized that it should have been triple that amount because the production, the activity has continued to grow along with the impacts and the challenges. So I think this legislative session really seems like we don't have to make the sell anymore. It's just the semantics of how is it going to work. We like what 1358 does because it puts money right into the sheriff's department, right into the emergency management agencies so they can hire full-time paramedics, ambulance workers, right into the fire departments so they can make those long-term investments. We've kind of been band-aiding them together, frankly, with grants, and this provides some type of also gives them a piece of the pie. As oil production goes up, they're going to get more and more money by really reducing the threshold amount that goes to the state after a certain period. So I think it's a great bill, and a few things are going to change here and there, but for the most part there has been broad support across the entire legislature for, this is a substantial amount of money back into these communities, and it's desperately needed. Are
they getting a big enough piece of this pie, in your judgment?
Well, I think under this bill, it is going to be a lot more. And, we've also got the oil impact funds, the $150 million. If you can get some of these communities out of that and start using that money for those adjacent things, like, things like daycare came up in the last 2 years. Who would have thought even 2 years ago that we would be in critical need of helping daycares get established? So we see those things. That money should be for those incidental things that come up. Let's get the money back to these communities. And also they need it for planning purposes. This will give them some long-term assurances. Before, they were basically operating on a two-year appropriation from the legislature. This makes them a bigger part of the permanent formula. And I think we can all assess we don't know where the oil production is going to land, but we know where it is today. And we think we know where it might be, at least as a base level for them going forward.
Mr. Brose and Mr. Ness, I'd like to ask you both this question. Mr. Ness just mentioned the impact fund and the amount of money that goes into the impact fund, and that has grown quite exponentially over the last 2 years. Is the oil impact fund in and of itself necessary, or could that money be better spent by just directing it to local governments in the same fashion that the oil production, or the portion of the oil production tax is?
Dale, we still need the impact fund because you still have some, we have the not core, but where the most activities at the top 7-8 counties, that get a pretty good production. They get the formula change will get them some money that they can work with. Then we got some of the smaller producing counties with the cities and schools, and inside those that there isn't as much production there. They still have roads because they may have disposal wells. They may have something that's not in their county or in their jurisdiction that they can't cover. So this way we can go to the impact fund and probably help those people out. Even some of the smaller communities, the Dunn Centers and the Alexanders and the little places that have some impact, some people want to live there and some people want to do some things in those little communities. Well, when the bigger communities need every little bit we can get hold of, there's nothing for them. Well, this way, it might be population based, how they get their funding from the oil fund, whatever. They might need some help, and there will be some for them to help out because somebody wants to set up shop in Halliday or Dunn Center, and not that we got to make them metropolises, but they need a little help with some of those expansions, and so I think it's a good thing that we still need an impact fund because there's still some places out there. Let's get 2 years down the road or 4 years down the road, then let's see where everything lands. But there's still a big impact out there, and one of the things we call it impact. The other issue I'd sure like to, one of the county commissioners at a hearing here a few weeks ago, or a little over a week ago, really hit it on the head, and that was we need some help out here to keep this revenue stream going. And one of the things he brought up is they fixed a road that went from 2 state highways and was about 10 miles long. And he did a very good job of explaining that when you used to drive that road, that 10 miles would take you 35 to 40 to 45 minutes to drive because it was so rough, and so there was absolutely no way that county could maintain it. They went in and took some of the money that we've gotten. They went in and beefed up that road, paved that road, and now that 10 miles takes less than 15 minutes. He used 15 minutes, but they're driving 65.
I suspect he's driving faster than that.
But anyway, he was saying is the industry, everybody that used that road saves a half an hour of time. And when that road had 4,000 vehicles, it's probably going to go to 8,000, 9,000 vehicles because it's a really good road now. That half an hour is somebody's money all the way along. And if we can save the industry or ourselves time, that equates to more money. That the industry, if they have X dollars to drill oil wells and they can start doing it cheaper, that means they'll drill some more oil wells. And the more oil wells we have, the more money comes to the state, the more that revenue stream stays with us. And whether we want I'm not saying we don't want it. There may be some people out there that don't know if they're excited about the oil industry. Doesn't make it. It's going to be here. It's here. It's going to be here for a while. We just as well work with it and make it as efficient as we can. And that's a revenue. We need to keep that revenue stream going. And we call them impacts, but on the other hand, we just need to help the industry and ourselves get a better road system, get better housing, or more housing, or whatever we need to make it. It works the same with the state. We today at one of the committees, Grant Levi, the interim director for the DOT, showed a chart of how it costs, and I think it was, if I remember right, to do certain things on the one kind of a road project, it was 1.7 in the western part of the state. It's $1 million in the eastern part of the state. Well, we spend $700,000 extra to build a road in western North Dakota right now. That comes out of our pocket. That comes out of the state treasury. We need to reduce that. The quicker we get infrastructure out there, the quicker that gets and the less it costs everybody in the state of North Dakota to do that.
Mr. Ness, Mr. Brose used the phrase "keeping the revenue stream going." In your opinion, how does one accomplish that purpose?
Well, I think North Dakota's favorable business climate has really set the stage for not only the oil and gas industry, but really all the other economic success in the state. And I think that's an important part. You have to look at, we talk about all of the various shale oil plays. Where's the competition? And I don't care if you're putting wheat in the ground or corn in the ground or if you're drilling oil wells. You're going to take your dollar to where your return is best. And essentially what's changed in the Bakken now since just about a year ago is that people have their leases held. So today, that means you've been in and you've drilled your one well on that 2 miles space unit. And you now, as long as that well is producing, you can make any decision you want as far as, do I want to drill today? Do I want to drill next year? Do I want to drill 3 years from now? So everybody looks at every well individually, just like you would as a business person look at any investment decision. It's a $10 million well. You're going to put that well in the best place you can get the best return at today's dollar for it. So they now have the options. So if there's tremendous sweet spots in the Bakken, you're going to drill in those areas. It's very economic. But as we've seen, as you get out to the fringes, the economics change, and the costs of the Bakken have been extremely high. So the more infrastructure we can get in place, the more pipelines we can get in place, capture that gas, capture that oil, move it through pipelines, get it moving quicker. You get a better return on your barrel. You get it to the East Coast now, to the Delta refinery. You get a couple extra bucks a barrel. So those things matter to the people making those investments, and that's what will keep the revenue stream coming in. And that's a forgotten art in North Dakota. We kind of begin to take all this for granted, but there's nobody out there that makes a decision to drill a well that's not in their best economic decision making of that particular day at this point. Once those leases are held, the rules change.
And how are, Mr. Brose and Mr. Ness, how are things progressing in terms of the oil transportation structure being established, whether it be pipeline or rail loading terminals, to take some of the pressure off the roads? How is this progressing at a quick enough pace to suit you, and to what extent has the extent that it's progressed so far taken pressure off the roads?
Well, we're from the rail facilities. We still concentrate some of that. They're still got to get from the well to the rail, and we still have a lot of trucks on the road that are doing that. And so we're not there yet. We need to get the collection system, and I think Ron said it a little bit ago, that if they choose to drill more wells in their units, they're more likely to put that pipeline in. If they're going to just hold production for a while, then we're not going to get that. They're going to just drill some wells here and there, and I think it's coming and it's going to be there. I think we all got to be vigilant to make sure we don't get carried away with whatever that is, whether it's housing or whether, it's a lot of things. We need to get the housing in place. We need to get some of those things. I mean, hopefully that the fact that some of the service companies that do the fracking and all those kind of things have some facilities in place. We just got to get it. We got to get some housing there yet to make sure they don't have to ship their guys in from way out of state on a 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off basis. We could get them living here, and it'll reduce a lot of costs that way for everybody.
We're speaking to Mr. Dan Brose, who's the president of the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties. He is a city engineer in the city of Bowman in southwestern North Dakota. We also have with us Mr. Ron Ness, the president of the North Dakota Petroleum Council, and Brady Pelton, the deputy director of the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties. The Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties is our sponsor for this hour of the legislature today, and we'll be continuing our conversation with Mr. Ness, Mr. Brose, and Mr. Pelton in the next half hour coming up after our break. And thank you, gentlemen, for your participation so far. This is Dale Wetzel. We're coming to you from the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck, North Dakota. This is the Legislature Today radio show. We are sponsored this evening in our second hour by the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties. We have with us Mr. Dan Brose, the president of the association. He is the city engineer in Bowman, North Dakota, in southwestern North Dakota. We have Brady Pelton, the deputy director of the association, and we have Mr. Ron Ness, the president of the North Dakota Petroleum Council. Mr. Ness, tomorrow we're going to see in North Dakota, near Dickinson specifically, a extremely rare event in this great country of ours, and that is what?
Well, tomorrow, in the first time in 40 years in the United States, we're going to break ground on a oil refinery right here in Dickinson, North Dakota. Going to take 20,000 barrels a day of sweet Bakken crude oil. And Montana Dakota Utilities is going to convert that into 8,000 barrels of diesel fuel a day for North Dakota farmers and for North Dakotans. I think this is just it's a remarkable event. And, you think about that, 40-plus years. Marathon Oil built the last refinery in the early 1970s in Gulf Coast, Louisiana. And nobody has gotten it done. So we're going to be very excited to be there tomorrow. And I think it's just absolutely exciting for North Dakota as we look at the value-added components that are coming off the Bakken.
Why is it that it has been so long since we've had a new oil refinery in this country?
Well, I think a number of things. Number one, America hasn't been receptive to embracing the fact that we want to expand oil refining capacity in the U.S. We have not seen a new green field. We've seen refineries expand that already have a footprint. But, you are not going to see people out protesting in Dickinson, North Dakota tomorrow. There's going to be cheering in the streets as the state's highest elected officials will be there, lamenting that the 100 great jobs that are going to be in that community going forward. You talk about impacts. What a wonderful impact for diversifying the economy in Dickinson and providing something we also critically need. Secondly, refining is a difficult business. And there's been a lot of study and a lot of discussion about this over the past 6-8 years in North Dakota. But Montana Dakota Utilities has come up with a mix here that works. They're going to take the part off that barrel of Bakken that they can basically, it's like a still. You heat it and you get the diesel fuel first. They're going to take that off, and then they're going to take the other component, which is mostly the gasoline component of that barrel, and they're going to ship it down. They're a pipeline company also. They're going to ship it down their pipeline to a company by the name of Calumet, who will take that, turn it into naphtha, and use that in their processes as they have other chemical components. So you've got to find the value for the whole barrel when you're talking about an $80 barrel of Bakken crude oil, and that's what most people haven't been able to come up with that I think MDU has cracked the code on.
And naphtha, I understand there's quite a market in Canada for that.
There is a real good market in Canada as they use it as a diluent in the oil sands. But also there's other markets for naphtha as well. So naphtha, right now you can't take that barrel of gasoline, of crude oil, and turn it into gasoline and effectively market that gallon of gasoline. And refining's a tough business. People don't quite grasp that refiners hate high crude oil prices. It's an input cost for them. So if you start with a higher input cost, you've got to start with your base feedstock at a high price, and ultimately your gasoline's going to cost a lot. But they want, if you can find something else to use for that half of that gallon, that barrel, rather than gasoline, you're better off right now. And unfortunately, you think about how much we all need and demand gasoline, but you've got to be a much larger refinery in order to have the economy of scale to compete.
Mr. Brose, how significant is it to have a new supply of diesel fuel in western North Dakota?
Well, I think it's really going to be a great thing. It takes the trucking off that, for the people that are out west, whether it's the agriculture people or the oil industry. I mean, we all those trucks and everything that's going up and down the road needs diesel, and I know there was some issues harvest time again last year, to get enough diesel in to make sure we can get our harvest done and whatever, to get it to our state. So I think it's going to be a really big thing that we can produce it ourselves. We can use it, whether it's in agriculture or whether it's in any other business that we have, or the trucks that drive up and down Interstate 94 coast to coast. Why, at least we can have some of that. And it's just like every other value added thing that we do. It's a few more dollars that rattle around North Dakota before they leave. And if it's a multiplier, whatever that is, a 3 or a 5 or a 7 or whatever, those dollars rattle around North Dakota before they sneak away. And that's just a better deal for us. So,
Mr. Ness, when we're talking about people who work at refineries, how much do they get paid?
Well, the average wage of the refining industry is pretty high on a scale of, I would believe that Tesoro has some of the highest wages in the state, because you're talking typically about a lot of processors that go to school right here at Bismarck State College. You're talking about chemical engineers. You're talking about all of those people. So I would assume that their wage scale is quite high. I haven't seen what Montana Dakota Utilities plans to do, but the fact that it's a Bismarck, North Dakota company is also pretty exciting. Do you
know when this construction will be finished? When this refinery will go online?
I'm thinking it's October of 2014. I will know. I'm sure I will know about 10 o'clock tomorrow.
Mr. Pelton, I wanted to ask you to just describe for me the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties. Who makes this up? Who makes up this association, and what is its purpose?
Well, our membership consists of the counties, cities, and school districts of western North Dakota, primarily those that are involved with facilitating all of this growth in the oil and gas industry. Our main mission as an association is to unify the voice of all of those members and present that to interested people.
How difficult is that to do? Because I imagine that you have certain constituency groups that have different interests.
Well, with the 3 different bodies represented within our organization, it is a bit of a challenge getting on the same page. Luckily, we've been very blessed, I think, with an outstanding executive committee made up of 3 representatives of each of those 3 groups of people, and they've been able to lead our association fairly well throughout the legislative session as we are now, and everything. So I think we're doing pretty well with good leadership. We also have an outstanding executive director, Vicki Steiner, who wasn't able to be here tonight, but she is also leading our association in a very good way.
What about the deputy director? Does he have any role in this at all, in the outstanding performance of this association?
That's to be determined, I guess. I serve at the pleasure of the executive committee, and that's how we go with that.
Mr. Brose, what are the interests of the association, and how do you reconcile them to the extent that they need to be?
Dale, it's been pretty good. Our big push has been, especially since the Bakken thing has taken off in the last 6-7 years, is to try to figure out how we're going to handle the oil industry moving in, and how we're going to stay ahead of what we need to, whether it's growing our cities or keeping up with school districts. Obviously, the counties have issues in not only roads but law enforcement and social services, and so our big area has been, how do we handle those things, and it's kind of been a progressive thing. About 5-6 years ago, 2-3 sessions ago, the big issue was roads. We were finding an impact on roads, and how are we gonna do that, because there's lots of trucks on the road. Well, that stayed there, and that was okay. We kind of we didn't handle it. We didn't get it all we wanted, but we started figuring out how to do that. And we got an Upper Great Plains in here to help us study the impact to roads. The last session, what really surfaced was, what are we going to do about housing? We've got cities that need a lot of things, and we worked that through the Energy Impact Office, and we started getting studies, and we've had some studies being done, and Vision West was a very a good thing that we've got some grant money from the federal government and the state government to do Vision West out there, and putting plans together. And now this session we're finding that schools are an issue. So it's been kind of a progression as we've gone along. So we've worked on one thing really hard one time, and another, and it's just slowly been adding to it. But it all fits together, and when we all get done, I guess whatever the definition of infrastructure is, whether infrastructure is a road, the sewer and water system, or a desk in a school building, they're all infrastructure. We all need all those components to make this thing work, and I guess that's where we're coming to, and it's been pretty good. Most of everybody's been involved. A lot of times we work on it to how do we affect. We got some bigger producing areas, some smaller producing, and we've always tried to get to do some formula. If we make a formula change, the things we ask, how does it affect every 17 of the counties? Are we covering everybody? Are we leaving somebody out? And we probably do, but we try not to. And we've been pretty good, and we've worked with the governor's office. We've worked with the legislators a lot more. We're a lot more active in that the last few years to be able to do some of our work ahead of time. It's kind of like coaching. If you haven't got them coached before the basketball game, it's too late to do the coaching during the basketball game. So we're kind of trying to do some of those things way ahead of time to make sure when we come to issues or sessions, we're prepared. And so,
Mr. Ness, to what extent does an association like the oil and gas producing counties work with your group in terms of trying to accomplish any sort of shared objectives that you might have?
Well, we've actually worked extremely close together, I think, for the last 6 to 8 years. We do education town hall sessions throughout western North Dakota with the oil and gas producing counties, which I think has been extremely valuable as we've tried to educate people not only about, they want to understand the Bakken, they want to understand the technology, what's coming to their communities, but also about what the expectations are, how this is going to kind of play out in some of these communities, and it's kind of a learning curve. We've all learned, and we've all hopefully gotten better at things, but we've also done tours with legislators. All of those things are getting to the point where Dan's at, where this session is really not an uphill climb to convince people about the impacts. It's played out in North Dakota's media just about every day, the impacts, but really of just focusing in on and making sure we get the dollars to the appropriate place. And you know, the people out in western North Dakota, the community leaders in all of those groups, the cities, the counties, and the school districts, have to continuously be commended. I think people across North Dakota, you know, should be thankful we have leaders out in those communities that have stepped up to the challenge. Can you imagine being the mayor of Stanley, North Dakota, or the county commissioner in McKenzie County, or the school superintendent in Williston? It's a tremendous challenge, and they have stepped up. We've kept good leaders in those positions, and I think something that all of us should commend them for.
What do you think the prognosis is for the industry at this point? Is it going to continue its rapid growth? Is the growth leveling off? Is it declining? What do you see happening in the next couple of years?
I think that most people in industry would tell you that we feel that the level of activity peaked somewhere around June or July of last year. As you saw, the rig count, it peaked, and that is the ultimate barometer of oil movements and activity, is the rig count. We had 218 rigs in May. By about August, September, we were down to about 180, and that's kind of where we've been. So that tells me that you're leveling off. Companies, again, we're done with the race of racing around for 6 or 7 years. You know, we talk about boom and bust, but we're 6 or 7 years into the North Dakota side of the Bakken. And the Montana side of the Bakken started in 2002 or 2003, so we're 10 to 11 years into, you know, the 80s boom lasted a total of what, Dan? 4 years?
Yeah.
Maybe less than that, probably. They were headed out of here before that. But so this is a different place. So it's flattened out. Companies are focused now on becoming more efficient, reducing their costs, reducing their movements. All of those things help reduce impacts, but the infrastructure is critical, because without core infrastructure, those trucks have to keep moving. So every time you get a pipeline in place, that might be 100 trucks out of an area, out of a quarter area of a county. Just think of what that means. You put a pipeline in for gas, a pipeline in for oil, a pipeline in for fresh water and produced water, trucks are gone. And of course, that also reduces some of the demand on some of the other infrastructures out there. So we're seeing the hotels in place. Big difference this year. You and I could head west today and we'd find a hotel room. And yeah. I think the housing thing is going to evolve. So it's going to change. You're going to see some of this secondary activity, but I think industry has peaked.
You mentioned getting more efficient. What steps have companies taken to become more efficient in terms of, you know, paying less to drill a well?
The big thing is that they are essentially all moving to pad drilling now. So pad drilling is where you have one well on a 5 to 7 acre pad. Traditionally, you'd move and drill another well a couple miles over. Well, now they're coming in and they're drilling 4 to 6 wells on a pad. So you just put them out like, you know, holes in the ground. You move 30 feet. The type of drilling rig, instead of tearing it up and taking it down and having 45 semis, it just walks. It literally just skids over and walks on its own. 30 feet over, you drill another well. Again, you walk over, you drill another well. Then you come in behind them and you complete these wells. So they can do them very fast. So you're drilling as many wells with fewer drilling rigs, fewer moving parts. You're getting water systems in place, so you don't have to truck all your water in. You're looking at big tanks of huge multi swimming pools full of water, fresh water, that's right there on location. So you just keep filling that on a continual basis. It's not a race in and a race out. You might be on that pad for several months, getting all of that work done. You move over a mile, you do it again. You move over a mile. So that reduces costs by reducing movements.
Mr. Brose, how has this more efficient approach by the companies, has it taken strain off the road network?
Dale, it has some. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't. It has taken some off, and it needs to. And I think one of the things we're working with in our association, and Ron's been very good about including us in when some of these companies come in and talk about it, and hopefully we can get to a point where they can give us some idea on their plans. And I know some of it's always their own
close to the vest type stuff.
Yeah, they don't want to give all their secrets out and those types of things. But as we get groups of companies that say, this is my acreage and this is my area I'm going to develop, they can give us an idea that we can work with. Because one of the other days when we had a meeting, I said, we're out there building roads in the counties and we need some idea. Right now we're rebuilding what we know, and that's called a farm-to-market road. That's what it was before it got ruined. That's what it is today, is a farm-to-market road. Is that the right road to be rebuilding? We need to know that, because there's not enough money, never will be enough money, to build every road out there that's going to be to the standards that can carry a full load through the spring and whatever. We're going to need an idea what you need to do, because that's what we need to build. And if we do that, I think we'll be better off with all of us. That being said, though, what Ron says is good. There is some trucks you'll take off the roads. It won't be quite as bad, but I can tell you the oil industry always needs roads and always moves. Being from Bowman County, our big push was the Red River B, which was the late 90s and early 2000s. That they finished drilling that out in 2003, 2004, somewhere in that area. Has the traffic slowed down a little in Bowman? A little. Now, we never had fracking down there, but it just seems like the workover rigs and the men who have to go out there, and there's still some trucks and there's still some things going on. They always change, and I always talk about the guy. They get a new reservoir engineer, and then they move all the tank batteries, and they build a new central tank battery, and they gather these 8, 9, 10 wells together, and they do whatever, and then they must get a new reservoir engineer, because 3 years later they decide to build a new tank battery over here and abandon the one that they had over here. Mm-hmm. So there's always something going on. There's roads. If you go out to Bowman County, there's still trucks going up and down the road, tonners, maintenance. Those wells need maintenance all the time, and there's always going to be a need for the road structure. We just need to build it right. We need to build where they need to be, because we can't afford them all, but we need to know what they're going to do and where they're going to do it, so we build them in the right place and to the right strength. And I think if we can work with the industry that way, we'll make them efficient, and we'll use our money efficiently.
Ron, do you see the demand for good roads continuing even after the drilling is done because of the maintenance needs that Mr. Brose was just talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And the maintenance of these wells, they're big wells. They're 2 miles down, 2 miles out. But most importantly, the real question is what's going to be next? Who's going to leave? If you can only get 3 to 7 or 8 barrels out of 100 in the ground, somebody's going to come up with the technology. Who's going to be that brilliant person that's going to come up and figure out how to get another 5 or 10% of that oil out of the ground? Because the prize in the ground is too great, and nobody's figured that out yet. And that should really be, after we begin to get this infrastructure focused, that's what's on the brains of the CEOs right now. We're going to get more efficient to make this still a cost-competitive play, but B, how do we get more? We're putting a lot of our eggs in the basket of the Energy Environmental Research Center at the University of North Dakota. EERC is a great research university, and you'll see that the big Bakken players are putting this into their hands, and because we got to figure it out. If we can get more out of that well, everybody wins.
And to what extent do you think we're close to some sort of breakthrough along those lines?
I think at this point we're still between 0 and 0%. So I don't think anybody's. It's going to take a tremendous amount of investment, and essentially the Bakken has become a technology lab for the world in shale oil. Everybody across the U.S. and across the world now is looking at the Bakken and exploring their shales. But what the next step of that is how do we extract more of that oil from that extremely tight, dense rock that's like a tombstone.
And to what extent, how long do you think it'll take to crack the code? Do you have any idea?
Dale, I wish I had the code, frankly. I think we'd be having this discussion at a different location.
I think you do have the code. I think you're just hiding it from the rest of us. We've been speaking to Mr. Ron Ness. He's the president of the North Dakota Petroleum Council. He's the gentleman whose voice you just heard. We've also been speaking to Mr. Dan Brose, the president of the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties. And we've also had with us the estimable Brady Pelton, the deputy director of the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties, which is the sponsor of this hour of the legislature today. And we're grateful for your gentlemen's time, and thank you very much. And we will hear from everyone tomorrow night.